I walked out of the office to just walk in the snow and saw a girl sleeping on a bench, alone, in the cold. She said she was waiting for her mom and that I was her miracle. I thought I was just helping, but I didn't know that this meeting would change everything, my life, my heart, and the very concept of home. A year later, we spent Christmas together. Subscribe and comment on what city you're watching from. I never intended to walk that night. It had been a long day, the kind that drained you not just of energy but of meaning. My office, perched above Manhattan like an emperor's throne, had felt especially hollow after 12 straight hours of back-to-back meetings, strategic reviews, and numbers that blurred into one another. Deals were signed, targets met. The board was pleased, my name would flash again across another finance headline, and someone would send flowers to my assistant, who they thought was my wife. I didn't say goodbye to anyone when I left. I rarely did. I slipped my coat on, adjusted the cuffs of my tailored shirt, and exited through the private elevator into the lobby. My driver was already waiting outside, a silent silhouette behind the wheel of a black Mercedes. But when I stepped through the rotating glass door and felt the sharp sting of winter bite at my skin, I waved him off. "I'll walk," I said. He blinked, hesitated, then gave a slow nod before driving away. Snow had begun to fall again, quietly and with purpose, layering the sidewalks in a thin sheen of white that softened the city's edges. I had spent most of the last 2 decades insulating myself from discomfort, first emotionally, then physically. Private jets, chauffeurs, assistants who anticipated my needs before I voiced them. But tonight, I wanted to feel the cold. I wanted it to sting. I wanted something to push through the armor. I didn't have a destination in mind. I walked south through Midtown, my polished leather shoes crunching softly over the sidewalk. The streetlights haloed the snowflakes in golden rings. I passed late diners clutching steaming takeout bags, a doorman shaking salt onto the building steps, and a couple laughing too loudly under a shared umbrella. The sounds of the city were muffled beneath the snow's hush, and for the first time in months, I felt present. I turned onto a side street, quiet and half-forgotten, framed by low-rise buildings and a shuttered pharmacy. That was when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a pile of discarded clothes, a mound of fabric beneath a dim, flickering bus stop lamp. But then it shifted. A small, almost imperceptible movement. I stepped closer. It was a child. A girl, maybe 6, curled tightly on the metal bench, wrapped in an oversized coat that pooled around her like a deflated balloon. Her legs were drawn up to her chest, arms wrapped around them, face half hidden beneath the collar. Her hair was tangled, her skin raw from the cold, and her lips carried the faint bluish tinge that made something sharp twist in my chest. I stopped in front of her, unsure of what I was even doing. My breath clouded in the air. "Hey," I said softly, "are you okay?" Her eyes opened slowly. They were wide and startlingly calm, as if none of this, her condition, my presence, was alarming to her. She blinked up at me with a kind of clarity that cut through the fog in my brain. "My mommy went to find dinner," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "She said to wait here. I'm not scared." "You shouldn't be out here alone," I replied, crouching down so we were eye level. "It's too cold. You could get sick." She looked at me for a long moment, unblinking, then said, "You're the miracle, right?" I froze. That word, it echoed in my head, bounced off the inner walls of my carefully controlled mind. Miracle. She said it like it was a fact, like it wasn't strange for a man in a $1,000 coat to crouch beside her in the snow, like she had been waiting for me. "I don't know about that," I managed. She didn't argue, just reached into the battered backpack beside her and pulled out a crumpled photograph. It was a woman, dark-hued and tired-looking, smiling faintly into the camera. "This is my mommy," she said. "She said she'd be back before the snow covers my shoes." I looked down. Snow had already begun to gather on the rubber toes of her sneakers. "What's your name?" I asked. "Lily," she said. "Hi, Lily," I said, pulling off my wool coat. "Let me help keep you warm." I draped it over her shoulders gently. She sank into it as though it were a blanket spun from clouds. Her tiny body all but disappeared inside it. "Thank you," she murmured. "It smells like mint. And soap. And something nice." I sat down beside her, ignoring the cold that bit at my arms. She leaned against the back of the bench, her eyes half-lidded now. I glanced around. The street was empty, no cars, no voices. Just us and the snow. "I can stay with you," I said, "until your mom gets back." She nodded. We sat in silence, the kind that didn't demand to be filled. The wind whipped through the alley and I pulled my sleeves down over my hands. Lily didn't speak, but every few moments she'd glance at me with those calm, knowing eyes, as if trying to memorize my face. "Do you really think I'm a miracle?" I asked finally. She nodded again. "Mommy says miracles are people who show up when no one else does." I swallowed against the sudden tightness in my throat. For a long time, I had been the one who left, the one who didn't show up, not for friends, not for family, not for anyone who might ask something from me that couldn't be solved with a check or a signature. And yet here I was, sitting on a bench in a snowstorm beside a girl I had never met, feeling more human than I had in years. We sat like that for maybe 15 minutes, maybe longer, the cold, blurred time. But then I heard footsteps. Fast, sharp, urgent. A woman rounded the corner, clutching a damp paper bag to her chest. She froze when she saw us. The bag fell from her hands, containers of food thudding onto the snow. She sprinted forward. "Willie?" The girl sat up, smiling sleepily. "Mommy!" The woman dropped to her knees, pulled Lily into her arms, and turned to me with a fire in her eyes that could have melted steel. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded, voice hoarse with panic. I stood slowly, hands raised in surrender. She was alone. I just sat with her, gave her my coat. "She's a child," she snapped, arms tight around her daughter. "You don't get to, just because she looks cold." "I didn't touch her," I said calmly. "She told me you were coming. I stayed until you did." Lily stirred in her arms. "He's nice, Mommy. He didn't scare me." The woman's eyes flicked between us. Her breathing slowed, but the tension in her shoulders didn't ease. "I'm Elliot," I said. "I didn't ask," she replied. "Fair enough." Still, I looked down at Lily. "I'm glad you're warm now." I turned to go, but the woman's voice stopped me. "Wait." I glanced back. She looked at her daughter, at my coat still wrapped around her small frame, then said, "You paid for a night in a motel, right?" "I'll take it, just one night." I nodded once. She looked at me again, this time longer. "But we don't owe you anything." I met her gaze. "You don't." She nodded and stood, shifting Lily into her arms. We walked in silence, 4 blocks. She didn't speak. Neither did I. But something passed between us anyway, a fragile thread pulled taut by shared presence, not words. When we reached the motel, I stepped inside, quietly paid for a room under no name, and returned with the key. "You'll be okay here," I said. She took it, hesitating. "Thank you," she said, almost reluctantly. I started to turn when a small tug on my sleeve stopped me. "Lily, will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. "I still have more of the miracle story to tell." I smiled, crouched to her level. "I'll try," I said. "I'd like to hear it." She grinned, then ran back to her mother's side. The woman, Nora, as I would later learn, watched me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Not gratitude, not trust, but not anger either. I stepped back out into the snow. The city shimmered under the falling light. I didn't know it then, but nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I didn't go to the office the next morning. Instead, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold and stared out the window of my penthouse, watching the snow drift lazily across the glass, like the city itself had slowed to match the silence inside me. I hadn't changed out of yesterday's clothes. The coat I'd left with Lily was gone, of course, but it was more than the cold that clung to me. Something about the night before kept replaying, not just in memory, but in the muscle and marrow of me. Her voice, her eyes, that word, miracle. I'd spent my life building a world that left no space for the miraculous. I dealt in guarantees, projections, structures built on data, and decisions designed to remove risk. I had built my empire from systems measurable, scalable, clean. People admired that about me, investors respected it. But for the first time, I realized something ugly beneath the polish, that I had designed my life to never feel what I felt sitting on that bench. I should have moved on. I knew how to file something away, but I couldn't. Around 10, I picked up my phone and called my assistant. "I need you to discreetly look into someone," I said. There was a pause on the other end, but she didn't ask questions. She never did. She simply said, "Name." Her name is Nora Blake, early to mid-20s. She has a daughter named Lily. No deep digging, just basic info. Background, work history, if she's connected to any shelters. "Understood," she said, and the line went dead. I didn't ask myself why I was doing it, not yet. I told myself it was curiosity, maybe concern, a sense of responsibility after involving myself in something I shouldn't have. That night had stirred something in me, and I just wanted to make sure they were safe. I didn't believe that, even as I said it to myself. But it was the kind of lie that kept the deeper questions quiet. The report arrived by late afternoon, a brief file efficiently compiled. Nora Blake, 27, former line cook at a family-owned diner in Brooklyn, closed during the pandemic. No criminal record. One eviction notice on public file. Known to visit soup kitchens and community aid centers in Midtown. No other employment listed in the last 18 months. One dependent, Lily Blake, age 6. That was it. Clean. Quiet. A life with no red flags, but also no nets to catch her. She had done everything right, worked, provided, and still the world had pushed her to the edge. I closed the file and stared at the screen, then leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all settling in. I had read hundreds of profiles in my career. Executive summaries, acquisition targets, performance evaluations, but nothing had ever hit me like this one. I sat there for a long time, the snow still falling in slow spirals outside my window. Then, as dusk edged into the skyline, I stood, pulled on another coat, and walked out. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. There was no reason to. This wasn't business. At least, not the kind I understood. The community kitchen stood at the corner of an old church building downtown, nondescript from the outside but alive with motion within. I had funded this place through my company's charitable foundation years ago. It was one of those quiet projects. Write a check, get a tax benefit, feel good for 10 minutes. I'd never set foot inside. Until now. I entered without announcing myself. The inside was warm, the air thick with the scent of broth and bread and something sweet, maybe cinnamon. Volunteers moved with practiced rhythm, ladling soup into bowls, stacking trays, wiping counters. And there she was. Nora stood behind the serving line in a borrowed apron, her hair tied back loosely, a sweater several sizes too big pulled over her shirt. She was chopping vegetables, fast and efficient. When she moved, she did so with certainty, her hands knowing exactly where to go next, what needed to be stirred, what needed more salt. She didn't hesitate. She didn't falter. There was no flash to her movements, only focus. Grace born of necessity. She hadn't seen me yet. I didn't approach. I just watched. She greeted each person with a nod or a quiet smile, washed her hands after each task, served every bowl with the same quiet care. When the line slowed, she sat briefly on a crate in the back corner, sipping a lukewarm cup of tea. She looked tired, but not defeated. I finally stepped forward. She looked up as I approached, eyes narrowing in surprise, then something colder. "You," she said. "Hi," I replied. "What are you doing here?" I gestured around. "I support this place, quietly. I just wanted to see it." She didn't respond. Her gaze searched my face, looking for an angle, an agenda. "And now you've seen it," she said, setting her tea down. "You're good at this," I said, not sure why that was the first thing out of my mouth. She arched an eyebrow. I used to cook, she replied, before all of this. I could help, I said before I could stop myself. Get you on a small stipend, make it official. Nothing big, but steady. Her expression hardened. I'm not asking for charity. It's not charity, I said. It's recognizing value. She studied me for a long time, then finally nodded. Fine, but if I cook, it's on my terms. I don't want a boss. That night, she stayed late to prep for the next day. I lingered nearby, pretending to check my phone, but mostly just watching her. There was something oddly comforting about the way she moved. Precise but unhurried, like restoring order in a chaotic world. I found myself staying longer than I planned. When she finally finished and gathered her things, I walked with her out the back. She didn't head straight home. Instead, she walked 2 blocks down and turned into an alley I never would have noticed. In the shadows sat an older man, hunched under a threadbare blanket, shivering against the wall. Nora didn't flinch. She knelt beside him, whispered something I couldn't hear, then reached into her tote and pulled out a small container, leftover soup. She handed it to him gently, like passing a sacred object. Then she took off her coat, thin as it was, and wrapped it around his shoulders. People shouldn't die cold, she murmured, adjusting the blanket around his back. Not even if they made mistakes. I stood back, out of sight, something tightening in my throat. She didn't know I was there, didn't do it for an audience, she just did it. For the first time in years, I thought of my mother. She'd been a nurse, quiet, kind, the kind of woman who sat with patients others ignored. She died when I was 12, and after that, kindness became something I associated with weakness, vulnerability, risk. But standing there watching Nora, I saw her again, not physically, but her spirit, her patience, her refusal to look away. I turned and walked back to the main street alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Nora's voice echoing in my head, her steadiness, her fire, and Lily, bright, unflinching, waiting at a bus stop for a miracle she believed would come. The next evening, I returned. I didn't tell myself it was just to check in. I didn't need to. I knew why I was going. Nora was already at work, moving through the kitchen with that same quiet command. She didn't acknowledge me, but she didn't tell me to leave either. That was enough. Later, as the night wrapped up, she began loading up containers of leftovers. I watched for a moment, then stepped beside her. Mind if I join you? I asked. She glanced at me, skeptical. To deliver these, I added, lifting one of the bags. She hesitated, then handed me a container. You'll need gloves, she said, and maybe some humility. That was how it began. Every night after, we walked together. Through alleys, subway entrances, park benches tucked beneath stairwells. She moved with purpose, and I followed. People knew her, even if they didn't speak. She remembered names, preferences, allergies. She gave food, yes, but more than that, she gave attention. A look in the eye, a kind word, a hand on a shoulder. One night, I asked, "Why do you always look at them like that, even when they won't meet your eyes?" "Because someone needs to," she said. "I want them to know I see them, that they're still human." I nodded. I had no reply. As the nights went on, our conversations deepened. She told me about her childhood. Her mother, a waitress. Her father, gone before she could remember. The smell of soup always in their apartment because soup was cheap and warm and made a house feel like a home. "I've been invisible most of my life," she said once. "I guess that's why I notice people others don't." I told her about my mother, about the silence that came after she died, the way I learned to perform success until it became who I was. "You built an empire," she said quietly. Maybe I needed something to come home to. We laughed for the first time not long after. It was late, we were cleaning the kitchen, I accidentally knocked over a pan of water, and she yelped, tossing a dish towel at me. I caught it, surprised, and we both laughed, loud, unguarded, real. Lily, drawing nearby with crayons, giggled and clapped her hands. "You're terrible at cleaning," Nora said through her smile. "Shocking, I know," I replied. I've only ever cleaned up financial crashes. That night, as they left, Lily ran up and hugged me tightly. "Good night, Mr. Snowman." "Snowman?" I asked, amused. She grinned. "Because you came with the snow. And you always bring peppermint." I reached into my pocket and handed her one. Then I suppose I must live up to the name. What I didn't tell either of them was what I had done earlier that morning. I had bought a property, a small shuttered cafe space in the heart of Midtown. Modest, but solid bones, good light, decent equipment, a place that could smell like warm bread and laughter. I bought it through the foundation, no fanfare, no headlines. Called it Ember. And in my mind, I could already see Nora there, cooking, teaching, building something that didn't just survive, but healed. I didn't say any of that, not yet. I just kept walking with them through the city, night after night, wondering when it had stopped being about helping them and started being about needing them. I didn't know it then, but the truth was already catching up to me, and the moment she learned it, everything would change. I should have told her. Every night I walked beside Nora. Every evening I ladled soup beside her in the kitchen. I told myself I was being honest in the way that mattered. I wasn't wearing the armor of my name, wasn't leading with the title printed on the cover of Forbes or the net worth whispered in boardrooms. I was just a man, just Elliot, just someone who had wandered into the right place at the right moment and stayed. But it wasn't enough. The lie, even in its silence, had been growing between us like frost creeping over a window pane. At first it was invisible. Now I could feel it every time she looked at me with that fragile openness. Every time she told me something she didn't tell anyone else. She thought she knew me, and I wanted so badly for that version of me to be real. I wanted to be the man who stayed through the storm, not the one who built it. But my past was never far behind, especially not when my resources were being funneled into a project that carried my fingerprints, no matter how carefully I tried to hide them. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I'd come by the kitchen earlier than usual just after a meeting uptown. I had spent the better part of the day finalizing legal documents, wrapping up the last threads of the property acquisition, and confirming the budget. Ember was ready. The renovation plan was set, contractors lined up. The vision I had held in secret for weeks was no longer just a dream. It was tangible. Bricks and mortar, waiting to breathe. She delighted me by removing the majority. I was in the front hallway of the kitchen, speaking quietly into my phone. "Yes," I said. "It's finalized. The property's secured. Ember opens next month, just ahead of schedule." There was a pause, then the soft voice of my assistant on the other end. "Want your name on it?" "No," I said. "Keep it under the foundation. No press, no dedications. She doesn't need to know it's me." "You sure?" she asked. "It's a significant investment." "Huh. I'm sure she deserves this, not because of me, because of who she already is." I didn't hear the footsteps until I turned. Nora stood at the edge of the kitchen doorway, hands at her sides, a dull paring knife still gripped in one palm. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes, they were lit with something I'd never seen in them before. Betrayal. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. She stepped closer, slowly, like approaching something fragile and dangerous all at once. "You lied to me," she said, voice flat but trembling. "All this time." "I didn't lie," I said quickly. "I just didn't tell you everything." Her laugh was short and without humor. "That's not better." I took a step toward her, but she stiffened and I stopped. "Nora, I wasn't trying to trick you. I wanted to be real with you, to show you the part of me that isn't tied to the name." She stared at me. "You made me feel like I mattered, like I'd earned something, like I wasn't just another case file. But now I realize I was just another project, a quiet little donation wrapped in sincerity." "No," I said louder than I intended. "You weren't. You aren't." She shook her head. "I've seen men like you. I've served their coffee, cleaned their dishes, watched them toss their pity into the world like coins into a fountain. You think just because you give quietly, it means you're different. But it's still about power. You just hide it better. I flinched. "Nora, please," I said. "It wasn't like that, I swear to you. I didn't do this to feel good about myself. I did it because I believe in you, because I see you." She stepped back. "Don't," she said. "Don't make this worse by pretending it's love." I felt something hollow open inside my chest. The words caught in my throat. "You can give me all the money in the world," she continued, her voice now shaking, "but don't take my dignity. Don't pretend I need you to survive." I stood there, frozen. She looked at me one last time, then untied her apron with shaking hands and laid it neatly on the counter. The knife clinked as she set it down beside it. She turned and walked away. I didn't follow her. The kitchen emptied slowly. The usual hum of voices, the clatter of trays, the warmth of soup simmering on the stove, all of it faded. The silence that remained was deafening. I sat on the stool we used to share after closing time, staring at the bowl she had left half fill. It cooled slowly, untouched. Around me, the air settled into stillness. I returned to my apartment that night, but it felt foreign. The windows were clean, the art on the walls pristine, the fireplace gas lit with mechanical ease, but nothing warmed me. I wandered the rooms like a ghost. The coat I had worn was soaked through. I didn't bother changing. I lay on the bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word she had said. I had built my entire life around control. I knew how to contain things, how to bury discomfort beneath layers of discipline. But this was not containable. It broke through my routines, my defenses, my silence. I had lost something I didn't even realize I couldn't live without. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I didn't answer calls. I canceled meetings. I sat in my kitchen with another cup of cold coffee, wondering how someone could feel so hollow when surrounded by everything. 3 days passed like this. I went back to the community kitchen once, just to stand outside. I didn't go in. I watched through the frosted window, hoping to see her. But the counter was manned by someone else. The laughter was gone. The space felt quieter, slower. I wandered the streets at night, taking the same routes we used to take together. Past the church steps where she used to leave extra blankets. Past the alley where she'd given soup to the man wrapped in plastic bags. Each corner was a memory, and every memory was hers. At the end of one particularly long walk, I found myself beneath the same flickering street lamp where I first met Lily. The bus stop bench was empty now, covered in snow. The city moved around me, unaware. I stood there, motionless, as the snow collected on my shoulders, and whispered aloud to no one, I didn't save her. I looked up at the sky, my breath visible in the frigid air. He saved me. It wasn't her need that had changed me. It was her refusal to be defined by it. Her strength, quiet and stubborn. Her ability to care, even when the world had given her no reason to. Her kindness that asked for nothing. Her dignity, even in the face of abandonment. That was what I had fallen in love with. Not someone who needed saving, but someone who had saved herself and let me walk beside her. And Lily, bright, fierce little Lily, had known. She'd looked up at me and called me a miracle before I had done anything at all. Maybe because she believed that anyone who stayed, who didn't turn away, was already a miracle. But I hadn't stayed, not fully. I had kept a part of myself hidden, and in doing so, I had betrayed the one thing they needed most: honesty. That night, I returned to the route once more, carrying a bag of leftover meals I had packed myself. My hands were numb beneath the gloves, my feet stiff in the snow, but I kept walking. At the last stop, the quietest corner of all, I stood beneath the street lamp, staring out into the night, hoping for some sign, a laugh, a flash of a yellow coat, the shadow of a small figure tucked against her mother's side. There was nothing. The silence settled again, and this time it felt deserved. I closed my eyes and remembered her voice, low and tired but sure. I don't need to be saved, I need to feel like a person. And I realized, for all the things I had given, I hadn't given her that. Not truly. I had tried to rewrite her story without asking what it already meant. I didn't go home right away. I stood there until my legs ached and the snow soaked through the seams of my boots, until the last bus of the night passed, empty and silent, until the wind shifted and carried with it the scent of roasted chestnuts from a cart down the avenue, and I remembered how Lily had once said, "That smell makes me feel like Christmas." It wasn't Christmas, but something in me had ended, and maybe something else had just begun. The city hadn't changed, but I had. Snow still fell over Manhattan like a quiet judgment, softening the edges of a place that had never been gentle. Horns still blared. Steam still curled from subway grates. Men in suits still strode through intersections like gods, dodging taxis and fate with equal precision. But I walked among them differently now. Not as one of them, not entirely. It had been 3 days since Nora walked out. 3 days since she looked at me with the eyes of someone betrayed and said the words that undid everything I thought I knew about giving. She had left me standing in that kitchen with her apron folded neatly on the counter, her knife still wet from the onions she had been chopping, and I had let her go. Not because I wanted to, because I didn't know how to follow her without making things worse. On the first day, I went through the motions. I attended a board meeting, but I don't remember what was said. I nodded in the right places, signed the correct pages. People looked at me with the same polished admiration they always had. My assistant brought me coffee. A junior partner made a joke I didn't laugh at. At one point, someone mentioned a 10-figure merger and waited for my opinion. I stared at the screen for a full minute before saying, "Let it go." On the second day, I canceled everything. Meetings, dinners, calls. I sat in my office with the lights off, watching the snow fall through the floor-to-ceiling glass and wondering how many other people were sitting in silence behind windows like mine, pretending to be fine. That night, I walked past the kitchen again. I didn't go inside, just stood across the street, watching. Nora wasn't there. I knew she wouldn't be, but the absence still punched a hollow in my chest. On the third day, I found myself walking the route we used to take. Down familiar streets, through alleys lined with plastic crates and rusted bikes, past the bench where Lily had once called me a snowman and offered me a crayon drawing of a blue tree. I carried a bag of hot meals with me, boxed neatly and sealed with care. I handed them out in silence. No small talk, no explanations, just food, passed from one cold hand to another. They looked at me strangely. Some recognized me from the walks with Nora. Others didn't look at me at all. I didn't mind. I didn't expect anything. At the last hop, I stood beneath the street lamp where I had met Lily. The bench was empty, the snow untouched. No miracle waited there now. Just me. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the bag to be empty. Long enough for my fingers to ache through my gloves. I looked up at the sky, blinking against the flakes that drifted into my lashes, and I whispered the words I hadn't said out loud to anyone. I didn't save her. It wasn't a confession. It was a realization, a truth that settled in my bones with a weight heavier than any balance sheet. I had walked into her life thinking I was offering shelter, safety, a lifeline, but I hadn't seen her clearly until she told me what she didn't need. She didn't need a savior. She needed to be seen, to be respected, to be allowed to stand on her own feet without someone quietly holding the ground in place for her. And I had failed at that. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment, lights off, memories swirling around me like the snow outside. I thought of her voice, her hands moving swiftly through the kitchen, her sharp glances that softened when she spoke to Lily. I thought of the night she handed her own coat to a man who had nothing, without hesitation. I thought of the way she laughed, rarely, but with her whole face. And I thought of Lily, with her peppermint smile and her belief in miracles. I didn't know if I could fix what I had broken, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't walking away. The next evening, I returned to the kitchen. I didn't call ahead. I didn't send a message. I didn't come with explanations or apologies rehearsed like speeches. I came in through the back door, with the same worn coat I'd worn the night I first sat beside Lily on the bench. No fanfare, no expectation. The kitchen was warm, the air thick with the scent of ginger and garlic. Volunteers moved around me, glancing up, recognizing me. No one said anything. They didn't need to. I wasn't there as the donor anymore. I was just a man, waiting. I sat at the far end of the room on the old wooden stool where I used to test her soups. My hands rested on my knees. My breath was steady, but my heart pounded like a boy waiting to be forgiven for a thing he hadn't known how to name until it was too late. Time passed. Voices rose and fell. The world spun on. Then she appeared. Nora stepped out from the back, a bowl in her hands, steam curling upward in soft spirals. Her hair was pulled back in the same loose tie she always wore, but a few strands had come free, falling around her face. Her eyes found mine immediately. She didn't smile. She didn't stop. She walked slowly to the counter and set the bowl down in front of me. "Eat," she said. "I added extra ginger. It's cold out." I looked up at her, something catching in my throat. "I don't know when it started," I said, my voice low. "Maybe it was the night I saw you give your last bowl of soup to someone who couldn't even meet your eyes. Or maybe it was when you laughed, even though I knew you hadn't slept. But somewhere along the way, I stopped coming here to help." She didn't respond. Her hands were steady, but I saw the tremor in her jaw. "I came here," I continued, "because I needed you." She looked away, blinking too fast, then met my gaze again. "I don't know how to want things I can't control," I said. "But I know this. Nothing else I eat tastes right anymore unless it's made by you." She exhaled slowly, her lips parting. "Then don't leave again," she said, barely louder than a whisper. "I never needed someone to bring me miracles. I just needed someone who'd stay. Even when it's hard. Especially then." I stood, slow and cautious, like approaching something sacred. "I'm staying," I said, "not out of guilt, not to save anyone, because you are the one thing I didn't know I was missing, and now I do." I reached out, resting my hand on the edge of the counter between us. I didn't cross the space. I didn't take more than I was given. I just waited. She looked down at my hand. Her own fingers hovered above it, uncertain, then lowered. Our hands touched. Her palm pressed into mine. There were no more words needed. Behind her, a small voice echoed from the kitchen doorway. "Told you you'd come back, Mommy." Lily stood there, clutching a drawing in one hand and a peppermint in the other. Her eyes sparkled, her grin wide. She ran across the room and threw herself into my legs, hugging me with all the force her small frame could offer. I bent down and scooped her into my arms. "Did you save the world today?" she asked, serious. "No," I said, "but I came back to the part of it that matters." 1 year later, the snow returned to New York. But this time, it felt different. Softer. Kinder. It dusted the rooftops of Hearth Village like a benediction, a quiet blessing over something new. The village had risen slowly, brick by brick, heart by heart, on the edge of a city that rarely paused for breath. It wasn't flashy, it didn't make headlines, but inside its gates there was warmth and purpose. A community kitchen that served not just meals but dignity. A garden where hands planted seeds that grew into second chances. A classroom for vocational training. A reading nook filled with forgotten books and remembered dreams. And at the heart of it all was Nora. She moved through the kitchen with the same grace as always, but now she wore the mantle of director with quiet authority. Her staff followed her lead. Her vision guided the menus, the programs, the outreach. She wasn't a recipient of charity anymore. She was a builder of futures. Lily, now 7, wore a bright yellow sash that read, "Ambassador of Smiles." She took the title seriously, greeting every visitor with her signature giggle and a pocket full of peppermints. On opening day, the small community hall overflowed with people. Donors, residents, families who had once called a bench home. I stood on the stage, wearing my simplest coat and no tie. Just as I reached for the microphone, a blur of color darted from the side curtain. "Wait," Lily bounded up the steps and grabbed the toy microphone she insisted on bringing. "This is my dad," she said proudly to the crowd. "Everyone says he's a miracle, but he's not." The room went still. She smiled wider. "He's just my dad. I wished for him a long time ago, and he came." Laughter rippled through the audience. Applause. A few tears. I knelt beside her and whispered, "You know what, kiddo? I think I wished for you too." That night, we returned to our small cottage near the garden. Nora sliced spiced apple cake in the kitchen. Lily knelt on the windowsill, watching the sky for lanterns. I stood nearby, a mug in my hands, watching them both. Outside, paper lanterns floated upward, carrying wishes in childlike scrawl. "I think that one's mine," Lily called. I wished for more hugs. I wrapped my arms around them both, pulling them close as the scent of cinnamon filled the room. Nora leaned into me. "We used to wish for a miracle," she whispered. I pressed a kiss into her hair. "You were the miracle I never dared ask for." And in that moment, surrounded by warmth and light and the quiet breath of something whole, I finally understood what it meant to stay. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales that stir the heart and restore faith in humanity. Want more stories like this one? Watch the next video. Find Discover on Quiet Act of Kindness Can Change a Life. And if this touched you in any way, share it. Someone out there might need to hear it today.